The president saying he was really overwhelmed by the devastation there. The president also noting that while he may be sad about what he is seeing and angry, that the U.S. will not be cowed by terrorism. Now, a couple of other things we did learn. White House saying that the plane that actually hit the Pentagon, the White House having real and credible information, in its words, that the intended target for that plane was the White House. The White House also saying it has credible information that Air Force One was an intended target, and that the White House hoping to put to rest any questions and criticisms about why President Bush went from Sarasota, Florida, to 2 military bases, one in Louisiana and then in Nebraska, before eventually coming back to Washington late on Tuesday evening. Now, as for President Bush, likely to be meeting with his national security team again on this day, we have seen the president stepping up the rhetoric a bit, saying that these acts were more than acts of terror, but acts of war. The president working the phones, reaching out to world leaders, trying to build what the administration is calling an international coalition against terrorism, not unlike perhaps the coalition his father tried to build during the Persian Gulf War in 1991. The U.S. also somewhat gratified, or very gratified, by the statement by NATO on Wednesday, NATO saying that an attack on one member of the alliance amounts to an attack on the entire alliance. Now, U.S. officials, Carol, not speculating on what kind of military response or what kind of response the U.S. will take, but clearly White House trying to build international support for any step it will take. Carol, back to you.
Sure. And Kelly, more and more Pakistan is becoming the focus of many of these discussions. A few minutes ago, we heard from Tom Mentir reporting from Islamabad about the meeting between the United States ambassador and Pakistan's military leadership. It seems that the signal being sent is that Pakistan might be willing to allow the United States or NATO forces to use Pakistani air to fly through their airspace. Is the Bush administration likely to ask Pakistan to be able to stage military operations from their border with Afghanistan, should the Taliban, should Osama bin Laden be definitively identified as responsible for these terrorist attacks?
Well, Carol, a lot of questions there, of course. Certainly, I heard Tom's report and definitely want to get some reaction to that, but have not been able to from the National Security Council staff just yet. You know, the White House and the U.S. officials certainly won't be talking about any kind of pre-steps that the military or the administration will take before the administration launches any retaliation. But certainly it will be heartened to hear that message from the Pakistani government. We do know that U.S. State Department officials, I believe, have been talking to Pakistani officials as recently as yesterday. So this is something the administration clearly is probably talking to through diplomatic channels. Carol.
All right. Thank you very much, Kelly Wallace, very early on the White House lawn. Vince?
Upon touring the Pentagon on Wednesday, President Bush described himself as, quote, overwhelmed by the devastation, and we are going to go there and check in with the Pentagon right now, and our CNN national correspondent, Bob Franken, who picks up our coverage and the recovery efforts there. Bob?
And Vince, it's easy to be overwhelmed. Of course, the sight behind me of that gash, that massive gash in the wall of the Pentagon where the plane collided is enough. But now becomes the tragic story, the tragic loss of life. And we saw as the day went on yesterday that the officials were able to get to some of the bodies that were inside and to remove them by stretcher. We were given no figures. We have been given no figures about the number of casualties who have been taken out already, nor have we been given any figures on estimates how many, in fact, will have lost their lives in this attack on the Pentagon. We are told that it's going to be far short of some of the estimates that went into the figures near 800. We were told by the Pentagon that there are about 150 who are unaccounted for here, not including those 64 who are on the plane. As a matter of fact, estimates that you get that are unofficial place the final casualty count here at about 200. And while that very grim work was going on inside the Pentagon, there was also the work of keeping the military going and the work of planning for retaliation, among other things. The Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld, told armed forces overseas in a message he sent that there could be military action ahead.
It is my duty as head of this department to tell you that more, much more, will be asked of you in the weeks and months ahead. This is especially true of those who are in the field. We face powerful and terrible enemies, enemies we intend to vanquish, so that moments of horror like yesterday will be stopped.
All the people who work at the Pentagon are expected back to work today. About half of them were brought in yesterday. All are expected to show up. They'll be assigned, if they cannot get to their offices for the obvious reason, assigned to other facilities while the military gets back up to full operation here and full speed as it plans probably as its primary objective, Vince, retaliation against those responsible for this.
All right, thank you very much, Bob Franken, reporting live to us from the Pentagon. Well, like most of us, you also have questions about the attack. Log on to our homepage and email us your questions, and then watch our coverage. We will ask the experts on the air. The only thing you need to remember is CNN.com. Why has Osama bin Laden been at the top of the list of suspects in Tuesday's attack? Our guest now may have some answers. He is Simon Reeve, authored the book The New Jackals, Ramzi Youssef, Osama bin Laden, and the Future of Terrorism, and he joins us now from London. Good morning, Mr. Reeve.
Good morning.
You have studied bin Laden. In your expert opinion, is this his signature, this attack? Is he at the forefront of this attack?
Well, it's early days still, but I think he is at the top of a very short list of likely perpetrators. If it's not ordered by him, then it's quite likely to have been inspired by him.
As you've studied him, what can you tell us about him that we don't know? Take us to the core of Osama bin Laden.
Well, I think the crucial period in his life was the 1980s, when he fought for 10 years against the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan. He fought in some horrendous battles, and I think that's given him a sense of fearlessness. It's militarized him. It's turned him into a man who is prepared to use overwhelming force in pursuit of his objectives.
Well, he cannot act alone. Perhaps you can tell us about who might be shoulder to shoulder with him, about his soldiers, his lieutenants, and this army that he seems to have assembled.
Well, several of his men seem to come from North Africa, particularly from Algeria. They form the core of his group. He also has other followers from the Middle East, from Europe, from America, from across the Muslim and from across the Muslim world. They're absolutely devoted to him. They do view him as their leader, but he is one of several leaders of a broad group. It's a loose-knit group. It's an umbrella group for various organizations who are battling for widely differing aims, from bringing down the government in Egypt to bringing down the government in Algeria to, of course, launching attacks against America because of its support for regimes in the Middle East and for its support for Israel.
Yeah, Mr. Reeve, I imagine he becomes that much more dangerous because he has the financial wherewithal to do things on a very broad scope.
He does indeed, but I think it's something of a mistake to make him out to be a billionaire or something like that. He certainly did inherit a large sum of money when his father died. His father was a major businessman in the Middle East. The Bin Laden Construction Company, which he founded, helped to rebuild Kuwait after the end of the war there. It rebuilt Beirut after the conflict there. And Osama bin Laden certainly did inherit a large sum of money. How much of that he still has, I think, is open to question. And I think it's also open to question how easily he can access that money. What is not in doubt, however, is that there is still money funding his group, and that money is coming out largely from the Middle East, from supporters of bin Laden's aims.
You call him one of the new breed of terrorists. Can you expand on that a little bit? What about this new breed? What makes them even more dangerous?
Well, I think in the past, terrorists have tended to have some sort of political goal, however unreasonable it might seem. And I think the fear now is that terrorists are prepared to inflict mass casualties in pursuit of aims that aren't easy to define. I mean, bin Laden's aim seems to be to attack America, to drive it out of the Middle East, but generally just to assault America in the hope that American support for countries in the Middle East like Saudi Arabia will wither away. But he's never really explained why he's gone after America. It seems to be some sort of anger at America, but also he feels betrayed by America. And he turned against America at the end of the Afghan conflict when America tried to persuade him and other Afghan rebel fighters to start talking to people they'd previously been fighting. So there's several causes of his anger, not just an anger at Israel, it's anger at Saudi Arabia. its anger at American support for regimes in the Middle East, but it's also he feels betrayed by them. He's a former asset of America that has turned against his former sponsors.
Well, Simon Reeve, thank you very much for your insights. We appreciate your time this morning from London. Thank you.
A pleasure.
It's just a few seconds ago you reported that all 3 New York airports are reopening. We want to show you a live picture of LaGuardia International Airport right now, where people are already beginning to line up. And while you're watching this, I want to let you know that we just got this in from the Associated Press, that out of Hamburg, Germany, police have detained one man in this northern city in Germany. He was detained for questioning as part of an investigation, according to the state police chief there. He refused to give the man's name, age, or nationality. It is simply that they want to question him because, quote, he had a profession that appears to be very interesting to us, but state police there declined to give any further details. Obviously, people asking questions internationally about any potential connections or suspects or information that may lead to who is responsible for these terrorist attacks on the United States. Also, I'm looking through this wire here right now. It says that earlier investigators were working under tight security as they combed through several apartment buildings in Hamburg looking for any evidence connected to 2 men believed linked to Tuesday's attacks. So once again, German state police are questioning a man in Hamburg this morning. As soon as we get more information on this, we will let you know. In the meantime, there you're seeing the damage to the Pentagon as rescue workers now say that they do not expect to find any more people alive in the Pentagon building. The good news, if you could call it that, is that they were speculating that more than 200 people were killed at the Pentagon, but that number has declined significantly. And the FBI will be hand-sifting through evidence at the scene today. It is far from normal, though, off the East Coast and the West Coast of the United States. Navy ships are patrolling. F-16s are still flying overhead in New York City protectively. New York and Washington are still in a high state of alert, and some 40,000 National Guards officers. These are domestic officers, civilians who are trained in military tactics to help in a national emergency. They have been dispatched. So once again, far from normal as the cleanup and rescue operations continue. In the meantime, the hijackers, more on this investigation here, the hijackers may have had links to Middle Eastern countries. And in this country, Arab American, Muslim, and Sikh leaders, among others, are reporting sporadic vandalism and assaults. CNN's Thelma Gutierrez found that many Arab Americans believe that a backlash against them is now growing.
Serene Sawaf is a 21-year-old university student. She is Muslim. She fears her scarf may make her a target.
Women receiving threats, take off your scarf or else we'll shoot you and go back to your country, and just awful, awful remarks.
This guy's cool.
Samir, Adam, and Ali were born in California. It is home. Today, they play indoors.
I am afraid that they might start being mean to Muslims like they did 200 years ago to black people.
Tamina Tanir and Fidi Hakim couldn't take their kids to school. The school was closed down for security reasons.
My children go to a Muslim school, and I'm scared for their security.
It's a terrible way to live, they say. After all, they are Americans, Arab Americans.
I feel 100% American. I've been raised here.
I'm really angry too, because you have to understand that even though I'm Muslim, I am American, and I cannot stand it that they did this. I cannot see how there could be any good in bombing the World Trade Center and hurting so many innocent people.
But Islamic centers in many cities are reporting the backlash is starting.
We received reports from New York City of people getting pulled out of their taxi cabs who looked Arab, and they were beaten up, and children who were beaten up.
The terrorist attacks in New York, Washington, and Pennsylvania were denounced by Muslim countries throughout the world, including Iran, Libya, and Jordan. In Afghanistan, Taliban leaders accused of harboring terrorists condemned the attacks. So did Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat.
We are completely shocked.
In Texas, 2 mosques were vandalized, their windows either shot out or broken. In San Francisco, California, blood was poured on the sidewalk of an Islamic community center.
I'm blown away because I'd expect that people realize that this is not American.